This was South Korea in 1953. Bombed out cities, homeless families, an economy so devastated that the average person survived on foreign aid and black market rice. This was South Korea barely 20 years later, a country rebuilding at a speed the world could hardly comprehend.
South Korea has rebuilt its own economy, its own buildings. It was such a difference between the time I left 1956 and 1972. Today, it's even more striking difference.
He wasn't exaggerating. This is South Korea today, a global tech superpower, one of the wealthiest in the world, home to Samsung, Hyundai, K-pop, and a neon-soaked Seoul skyline. These are three very different faces of one nation, transformed in the span of a single lifetime. But it came at a steep price: restricted freedoms, political repression, and a level of sacrifice few societies have endured in peacetime. To understand how South Korea reached this point, we need to go back to 1953, when the Korean War ended and the peninsula was left split in two, a communist north and a capitalist south. South Korea claimed to be a democracy, with a constitution and elections, but in reality, power was concentrated in the hands of one man, Syngman Rhee, the nation's first president. Rhee's government was fiercely anti-communist and heavily supported by the United States, which kept troops in the south and provided billions in economic aid to keep the country afloat. But no amount of foreign cash could mask what was happening on the ground. Corruption ran through every level of government, prices soared while wages stagnated, and unemployment crushed the young, leaving the generation who survived the war to face a future without opportunity. People had accepted hardship during the war because the nation was fighting for its life. But after 1953, they expected a chance to rebuild. When the promise of renewal failed to materialize over the course of the 50s, tensions rose. And in the spring of 1960, the cities of South Korea erupted. President Rhee's party had claimed a suspicious landslide victory in March of that year, and students, already frustrated by years of corruption, filled the streets. Security forces opened fire. Photos of dead students circulated widely, leading to a nationwide uprising now known as the April Revolution. Within weeks, Syngman Rhee was gone, exiled after a decade of harsh rule, and for the first time South Korea attempted genuine civilian rule. But the new civilian government made no impact over the following year, and power drifted towards the military. In the early hours of May 16, 1961, soldiers moved into Seoul. Tanks rolled through the streets, key government buildings were seized, radio stations fell silent, the military had taken control. The coup was led by a relatively unknown general named Park Chung-hee. Park's coup was framed as a rescue mission, a noble effort to rescue South Korea from corruption, chaos, and the familiar catch-all enemy, communism. His junta dissolved parliament, suspended the constitution, and promised to modernize the country. 2 years later, Park traded his uniform for a suit, held tightly controlled elections, and became president. Under Park, South Korea entered a new kind of authoritarian bargain, one that paired strict political control with an unprecedented push for economic transformation. When Park took power, South Korea was still overwhelmingly rural and poor. In 1961, income per person was around $70 to $80, lower than many African nations at the time. North Korea, with its heavy industry and Soviet support, looked far stronger. Park set out to change that, fast. Inspired partly by Japan's post-war model and partly by Soviet-style planning, his government launched an aggressive industrial strategy built around 5-year plans. The basic idea was simple. The government handpicked certain industries, textiles, steel, shipbuilding, chemicals, later cars and electronics, and designated them the backbone of national development. With support in the form of cheap loans and tariffs, companies were pushed to meet strict export quotas. Hit them and you got more loans, more tax breaks, more protection. Missed them and you were cut off and left to die. This created a high-pressure, high-stakes environment, capitalism accelerated and overseen by the state. To drive the plan forward, the government partnered with large family-owned conglomerates known as chaebols, Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and others. Park expected these firms to become engines of national development, and they did. The economy transformed at staggering speed. Exports jumped from a few $1 million to billions. Cities expanded. Rural families moved to urban centers in search of work. But this economic boom unfolded alongside a steady tightening of state control. Throughout the 1960s, political competition shrank. The KCIA, the Korean Central Intelligence Agency, became the regime's most feared instrument, with sweeping powers to surveil, detain, and intimidate critics. Most Koreans targeted by authorities weren't violent radicals. They were everyday people seeking basic freedoms, many of whom were silenced by accusations of communist sympathies, often without credible evidence. Such an accusation could isolate someone overnight. Neighbors would avoid you, employers might drop you, and the police suddenly knew your name. By the early 1970s, Park's popularity was already on the decline. Rising unrest and political opposition had pushed him towards the most sweeping power grab in modern Korean history. In 1972, he declared martial law, dissolved the National Assembly, and introduced the Yushin Constitution, a document that turned his presidency into a legal dictatorship. Under Yushin, the president was no longer chosen directly by the people, but by a tightly controlled body loyal to Park. He could run for unlimited terms. Civil liberties could be suspended in the name of national security. What had been authoritarianism became, on paper and in practice, a full legal dictatorship. Freedom narrowed dramatically, but the economy continued to surge. This period became known as the Miracle on the Han River. Extreme poverty fell sharply. Cities that once felt quiet and war-scarred began rising upward, filling with high-rise apartments, bright neon signs, bustling markets, and new commercial districts that signaled a country in motion. From the outside, it looked like Park had delivered exactly what he promised, but this progress was built on the backs of workers who labored long hours for low pay, with little power to demand better.
사실상 우리나라가 경제적으로 발전했다는 것을 인정을 해요. 인정을 하는데 그것이 전체 국민에게 골고루 이렇게 소득이 돌아가고 그런 경제 성장을 이루는 밑바탕에는 우리가 공장에서 다니는 노동자들이 진짜 새벽까지 일하고 밤늦게까지 일하는 그런 땀 흘린 그런 경제 성장이 이루어졌다고 보는데 사실상 우리 공장 다니는 사람들 옛날이나 지금이나 달라진 것이 하나도 없거든요.
Then, in 1979, the story took an unexpected turn. On the night of October 26th, during a dinner in Seoul, Park Chung-hee was assassinated, shot at point-blank range by Kim Jae-ju, the director of the KCIA. The motives remain debated. Some say Kim acted to prevent further bloodshed. Others believe it was personal, but the effect was the same. The man who had ruled South Korea for 18 years was dead. The country entered a moment of uncertainty. Some hoped democracy might finally emerge, but those hopes were quickly dashed. Another general, Chun Do-hwan, seized power in yet another military coup. Once again, the face at the top changed. The machinery of dictatorship remained intact. When citizens in the city of Gwangju rose up demanding democratic reforms, the government responded with overwhelming force. Paratroopers swept into the city. Civilians were beaten, bayoneted, and shot. Students, factory workers, mothers, shopkeepers, hundreds died. The Gwangju massacre became a scar in the national memory, fueling the push for democracy. By 1987, the pressure had finally reached a breaking point. An entire generation raised under dictatorship filled the streets in what became known as the June Democracy Movement, a nationwide protest that lasted weeks and brought the nation to a standstill. Faced with overwhelming public resistance, the regime relented. South Korea agreed to sweeping democratic reforms. Koreans didn't feel the benefits of this overnight. Mass demonstrations did return, this time aimed not at a dictator, but at the old power networks, economic inequality, and the lingering influence of foreign powers. In the early 90s, for example, some protests carried unmistakable anti-American sentiments.
양키 구홈에 대해서 제일 처음에 나온 얘기는 박정희 시대서부터 지금까지 우리나라의 군 전략은 모든 것이 미국 사람들이 지금 한미연합사까지도 이렇게 해서 지휘권을 미국 사람이 가지고 미국 사람이 지원 없이는 절대로 군부 독재가 성립될 수 없습니다. 그렇기 때문에 군부 독재에서 여태껏 억눌린 자유 정신을 되찾기 위해서 미국 사람들 이성을 찾아주십시오 하는 것이 다른 것입니다. 네.
Democracy had been won, but it was not yet trusted. Then, in December 1997, a symbolic moment arrived. Kim Dae-jung, once sentenced to death under a dictatorship, a punishment he survived only because of intense international pressure, was elected president in a free and fair vote. His election marked the maturation of South Korea's democracy, and the nation he inherited was dramatically different. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, South Korea was confident, innovative, and globally connected. Korean shipbuilders led the world, semiconductor firms powered the digital age, automakers expanded globally, Korean cinema, fashion, and pop culture surged internationally. The South, once a shattered battlefield, was now shaping global culture and technology. How then do we judge this transformation? On one hand, the achievements are undeniable. South Korea rose from the ashes of war and poverty to become one of the world's great economic success stories in a single generation. On the other hand, those gains came under harsh authoritarian rule. Political opponents were imprisoned, sometimes killed. Freedom of speech and assembly was sacrificed in the name of rapid growth, and many Koreans still carry the memory of fear, censorship, and repression. So the country remains divided about Park Chung-hee. To some, he is the architect of a miracle, the determined, uncompromising leader who dragged Korea into the future. To others, he is a dictator who justified cruelty with economic numbers. Today, the country faces a new set of crises, ones no dictator or 5-year plan can solve. Its population is aging faster than almost any other on Earth. Birth rates have collapsed to the lowest in the world. Economic divides have deepened, and the pressures of education and work have contributed to one of the highest rates of mental health-related deaths in the OECD. Layered over all of this is a startling gender divide. Surveys regularly show South Korea has some of the most severe male-female distrust and polarization in the developed world. The nation's remarkable transformation has seemingly come at a cost, and some of those costs are only now becoming fully visible. South Korea reinvented itself once. It may have to do so again.